Welcome everybody to the TheEdCollabGathering workshop number 12. Today we have with us the wonderful educators from the two writing teachers. We have Dana Murphy, Beth Moore, and Deb Frazier with us, and they're talking about going public with kids writing, rethinking for audience purpose and feedback. So without further ado, here's Beth Moore.
Hi, I'm Beth Moore, and I'm here with Dana and Deb. Hi, Dana. Hi, Deb. It's a beautiful fall day here in Vermont. How about you guys? What's going on in your neck of the woods?
It's a nice day here too in the suburbs of Chicago. It's a warm one, so we're soaking up the last days of summer still.
It's Columbus, Ohio is actually a little warm here as well, Dana, but we are seeing the first signs of leaves starting to change in fall.
So the three of us are from two writing teachers, and we are so excited to be with you all today to share our thoughts on going public with student writing. I'll be kicking it off with talking a little bit about the importance of displaying student writing. Then Deb will share some awesome ideas for everyday celebrations. And Dana will finish up with some ideas on feedback. To start out, I just want to share a little story that I've written about on two writing teachers in the past, but I thought I'd share it today. When I was in third grade, I had the most amazing teacher in the world. Her name was Miss Davis, Jan Davis, if you're out there. I'm still thinking about you. She was the kind of teacher who gave each one of us a hug on our way in the door every morning. She wore swishy skirts and cool jangly jewelry, and she played guitar, and we sang folk songs every day. And at my elementary school, we had the kind of parent-teacher conferences where kids came along with the parents. And I will never forget Miss Davis taking my mom and I out into the hallway where every kid had some writing on display on a bulletin board. And I still actually remember my writing being fastened to this red construction paper. And I felt really special because I had two stories instead of just one. And Miss Davis invited my mom to read my stories. And I remember just standing there with bated breath, waiting to see my mom's reaction to my stories. One story was about these magical cats, and the other story was about an imp named Impy. And my mom read these stories, and when she finished the stories, my teacher turned to me and my mom and said, "Beth is going to be a writer someday." And she said it with so much just certainty, and it was just like, well, of course, Beth is going to be a writer someday. I never forgot that. And even in times of my life where it was hard to find time to write or writing wasn't going so well for me, I carried that memory with me. And actually, a few years ago, my mom was cleaning out the basement, and she found a box of a lot of stuff from elementary school. And she found the two stories mounted to red construction paper, the draft and the nice typed up piece. Our teacher typed up our stories for us because she wanted us to know that they were special. So as we head into the school year, just remember that the things that you do in your classroom, displaying student writing and making student writing public, those might create lifetime memories for your students as well. Someday, one of your kids might be talking to their friends about how their teacher made them feel like a real writer. So let's talk a little bit about some things to think about when we're displaying kids' writing. Why display kids' writing? As you look at this list, just take a moment to ask yourself, who is the audience for the kids in your class? Who are they writing for? And more importantly, who do they think they're writing for? You might have all kinds of great plans for who's going to be reading their writing, but do they know? And does it change the way that they write? What is the purpose of the writing that they're doing? Are they writing to entertain other kids? Are they writing to sort through and organize their thinking about events happening in their own life? And do kids have a sense of what their purpose is? And chances are each kid is not writing for the same purpose as the kid sitting next to them. And do they know, do they have a sense of purpose? When you read kids writing, do you feel like you're getting to know them? Are kids reading each other's writing and getting to know each other? Because displaying that writing and sharing that writing with each other is a way to build community in your classroom and across your school. And finally, displaying student writing adds joy to the work that you're doing every day, making this hard work sustainable and something that you look forward to. Making student writing shows everybody, the kids and adults included, that you are proud of the work that they're doing. Kids see that writing on display and they feel proud as well. So one of the biggest questions that I get as a literacy coach is, does the writing on display need to be perfect? Should it be published perfect? What if my kid's work doesn't look the way my principal or families or even other kids think it ought to look? Sometimes people are nervous to display kids' work, their own independent work, because they're worried that that amazing work might look messy to the untrained eye. So I think it's really helpful to think of any writing on display as always a work in progress. And it's helpful to have a clear sense of what the revision and publishing process might mean at different ages and stages, because kindergarten published work probably isn't going to look the same as second grade, which isn't going to look the same as fifth, which isn't going to look the same as an adult. So thinking about K-2, we know that kids benefit from making revisions directly to their drafts. They're going to work really hard to cut things with scissors and cross parts out and make changes. They'll be rearranging pages and adding on flaps and post-its and doing all kinds of really big work to make their writing the best that it can be. And again, to the untrained eye, this might look really messy. Of course, to us writing teachers, it looks beautiful, but to the outside world, they might not understand what they're looking at. And so it might be tempting to say, well, I'll just have them copy it over so that people can appreciate it. But unfortunately, kids in K-2 are not generally super fast writers. It takes time to build up that fluency, and the thought of recopying an entire 6 or 7 page story that's already been worked on for so long might crush a kid's love for writing. And not only that, by displaying only the perfect work, kids get the message that teachers want to see neatness over creativity or a perfect product over a strong process. So then what happens is the next time around when you're teaching kids to revise, they are super smart and they'll remember that you made them recopy, and they'll be a lot more reluctant to make too many messy changes the second time around. So all that is to say that it is okay to put their amazing revision on display to celebrate the hard work that they've been doing. Let's contrast that to the grade 3 through 5 process, because that might look a little different and mean something different for the way that we display older kids' work. In the upper grades, the process is much of the same work, the cutting, crossing out, adding on, albeit older kids might be doing some of this work on a device rather than by hand. When they are writing by hand, older kids do tend to be somewhat more fluent, and they might even ask to recopy a draft. And when they do that, there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. There's no reason not to, as long as it's not taking too much time away from generating new work. In the upper grades, we do want to protect every minute of their independent writing time as much as we can. So if you think about it, if you take 1 day per unit and kids are recopying or retyping something that's already been pretty much polished, if you teach 7 units, that's 7 days of recopying. not generating new work. That's enough time for kids to write an entire new story. If you take 2 days per unit and you teach 7 units, that's 14 days of recopying or retyping something they've already worked really hard on, and that's practically enough time to teach a whole new unit. So we want to be really selective about when are kids recopying or retyping and why. So the last thing I'd like to say before I hand it over to Deb is not to wait to put writing on display. I always try to remember that as teachers, we get to see about 20 or 30 examples of writing every day while kids are at work during Writer's Workshop. But unless we put some of that work up publicly, kids are really only getting to see their own writing plus maybe their partners. It's helpful for kids to see many examples of the work that they are working on. They can look at other kids' work and kind of think to themselves, aha, that's what we're doing. I could do that too. They can see a range and variety of the work that their classmates are doing and see that there are indeed more than one ways of going about the work. So that's something that I'm reflecting on as a coach, is how can I support my colleagues to get writing up on display early and often. And I've been fortunate to visit a lot of schools as a consultant, and I'm always so impressed when I see like the first day writing on display, like this, just the writing the kids on day one goes right up on the first day. Or I've also seen on-demands go up on display in the first few days of school, or even kids writing goals or writing about what they are looking for in a writing partner. That can go on display right away at the start of the school year. So Deb's going to take over now and share some ideas for how she celebrates her students' writing often and daily in big and small ways. So over to you, Deb.
Thank you so much, Beth. You have so many insightful ideas and so many great ways to share. And as a matter of fact, so many reasons to share is what I really want to say. I was just talking to my class the other day about the importance of holding on to all your work, and all your work has value. So I may be asking you to Skype and share your wonderful story about finding your writing that you had when you were a child. Your story, I could picture your teacher, and I have tears in my eyes thinking about you standing there with your mom listening to that. Which also brings me to what I'm sharing today about the beauty of celebrating in everyday ways. I was a very shy writer, didn't call myself a writer, and still have difficulty with it, but colleagues who I greatly admire kept saying to me, you need to write this down, you need to share it, and having that audience is what brought me to where I am. So I definitely think sharing and talking about writing is so important. As I start to share my slides here and share my thinking on this, I want to remind you, like Beth had said, sharing writing doesn't have to be anything that stops your teaching or changes what you're doing in the day. The ideas that I'm going to share with you are embedded in our workshop, and they're opportunities that are available for kids every day. I'm sure all of you out there listening will think, oh yeah, I have that too, I have that too. I think it's recognizing it and making the most of it, because we all have lots of opportunities in our classrooms to share each day. So I'll share a few of those here with you now. And the first one, as Beth had said, I think it starts with building that community of writers in your classroom. You really need to know who is around you, what they're writing, and who you're writing for. Who is your audience, and what is it that they want to hear? So the first thing one of our very first things we do in first grade, and I've done this for a couple years, the idea originated with an idea I got from Anne-Marie Corgill, and that is the mini-me that you see pictured here on the left of the screen. And the mini-me is a paper doll, and on the back side of that, parents and families work together, and they list all of the things that their children are interested in doing, hobbies, family vacations, places they visited, family members, as well as things they don't like, because it's often fun to write about what we don't like. These then are brought into the classroom, and they're shared with the writing community. And as students share these, I record them in VoiceThread. So these mini-me's become a living being in our classroom, because other students can go up and go into the VoiceThread and comment back to their friends on the things they see and like, and the commonalities that they have and their interest. And then these are also displayed in the classroom, so they are a constant reminder to all of us of what makes that person an individual and their interests as friends. As I see these commonalities coming out in kids, we start creating a border for our writing board. And you can see some students here working on a sentence strip. So if my student Johnny shared that he enjoys the zoo, and I see 5 or 6 other students, they start, you know, the conversation erupts, and oh, I went to the zoo, and did you see the panda bear? I pull those kids together and ask them to talk about the zoo and then illustrate memories of that. So right there, we're already building a small writing community of kids who also enjoy the zoo and want to talk about that. So this might be a topic for writing later, and this goes up as a border around our board where we display our writing work. Another opportunity that we have often in the classroom that might be overlooked is just helping kids find their audience again and sharing with those who know you best. My first steps to being comfortable sharing my writing came with just sharing with friends that I teach with and I work with and I trust every day. So those opportunities that students have to conference with their partner or pull another person over to conference with, I allow my kids to be flexible in that. And if you need to talk about your story or you want to share with someone, that's your choice, and pull them over and share with them whenever you have a story that you feel like you need help on or you just want to celebrate all the work that you're doing. All of those opportunities are there for the kids in the classroom. I'm sorry, I'm having a little technical difficulty. There we go. These are some everyday things that are in our classroom that the kids can celebrate as they go throughout the day. This display board that you see here on the top left is the board that I was talking about where we put our class, we have our border, and those are all different student interests around the border. And then displayed on the board is writing, like Beth said she had seen writing go up on the first day of school. And the green piece of writing is the student's very first writing of the first day of school. So that stays up there all year long, and that becomes a reflective point for students as they choose new pieces to go beside that piece of writing. So that's an on-demand piece, or it can be an end of a unit. That is all student choice. So students can display their writing up on this board and celebrate that with their friends. I often see other friends going up and celebrating and looking for mentors in their writing and reading what friends have written. Like Dana said, now it's not just the teacher seeing the writing that's going on in the classroom, but the students are also seeing that writing of their peers there. So they go up and they find ideas, they get new ideas, and they confer and conference from there. So that's one opportunity for kids to share. Also, at the end of our writer's workshop, and if you're running a workshop model, I'm sure you have the same opportunity, is this share circle at the end of the day. And I do share circle in a variety of ways. Sometimes I invite you to share if I've noticed something in conferencing that I think that your peers might benefit from, or that the writer themselves will benefit from, I will share it that way. I also ask the students sometime to pull out a piece that, it could be a piece they're working on now or a piece from the past, but pull out a piece of writing and lay it on top of your folder. And then I ask the students just to look around the room for a few minutes, and I ask students to choose who they would like to share. Maybe I am wondering how my friend across the room is writing her version of Knuffle Bunny. Maybe I'm wondering how she's making her new story about Horrible Bear. And then that student has the opportunity to call on a friend and ask them to talk about their story. Sometimes we share our stories, and sometimes they ask questions about process. So it's a great time to talk about being a writer, what's going well for you, what's getting you stuck. And you can find your mentors, and you can find people to help push you along in the share circle. Other times we come back to this personal sharing, as you see in the bottom, and a small group of friends may come together. They're maybe working on the same story or trying the same technique. They might want to come together to try a story there. We also have the opportunity in our buildings to stretch outside of the classroom. A lot of times students might want to share their stories with previous teachers or principals in the building. even the custodians. I've asked my students before, who do you think might want to read your story? And the students often know who might want to read that story, and they will say, oh, I want to go read this to Mr. McGinnis, or I want to share this with Mrs. Teskey. And I allow them just to go down the hall and share those stories. They're very good about that. So that's a great opportunity for them to have that face-to-face time to share and to hear, you know, that feedback on their stories. Students love to do that. So that's another opportunity that's right there in front of you. Sometimes you want to reach out a little bit bigger, and you might think about making time for everyday celebrations digitally. That celebrations allow you to stretch past your classroom into the homes of your writers, into the authors. You can celebrate in so many ways this way. Our favorite is EduCreations in our room, and that's just a screencasting app. You can use any app. This one I find to be really popular among my more reserved writers. They'll put their writing in the screencasting app so they can put the actual photo of the writing there, and then voice over, and often they'll tell you the process of their writing and what they were thinking. So that is great to have. And also it enables the writer to share their writing without being there and being present. Kids sometimes can be embarrassed to share the writing and don't want to hear people read it, but this is a great way for them to feel comfortable. We often share things with different authors this way. If kids are making another vision of another version, excuse me, of a book they enjoy, they might share it this way. Parents love getting screencasts. I'm sorry, we have a cat. We might get, we might have parents this way. I also like to email these to reading intervention, speech and language, OT, whoever it is that might be a part of that child's educational process. They also enjoy seeing these stories and things come through. It helps them to evaluate their progress with the student and maybe their next steps as well. These EduCreations can also be put in a blog. Kids love to blog, and they can either write directly in the blog and share that out with same thing, family, friends, authors, and different audiences and previous teachers. That's something that students love to do. I'm sure you have many of these same opportunities in your classroom, and as you know, Twitter is a great way to reach past your current audience. So it really gives that bigger audience to the students, and so motivating. I think about this as a first grader to know, I mean, I didn't even think authors were real people, I think, when I was in first grade, and to know that Amy Dykman read my version of The Horrible Bear called The Horrible Princess and commented back to me. It's very powerful and motivating for writers. It really gives them that bravery to carry on and to try more with writing and to do the hard work of a writer. So I hope you found some ideas here that were inspirational to you and ideas that you might want to make available in your workshops. I'm sure they're all there. All you have to do is make the best of them. And I'm going to turn this over to Miss Dana. Much.
Thank you, Deb. I just was sitting here, I tweeted out about what a great idea to keep the kids' first attempt at writing up the whole year long. Like, what a great way to have kids reflect on how much they're growing as a writer. And I don't know, Deb, if you saw the Twitter question that we had about kids who are in special ed or might have IEPs sharing their final product, how we can get them to share and display. And your tool, your screencasting tools, I was thinking would be such a great way for those kids to be able to share what their writing looks like and then voice over it to share with other kids or their parents.
It really is powerful. I had a little boy the other day who shared, and we still haven't learned the art of feedback. We're in the process of it. It's our 5th week of school. But one little boy said from the audience, he scribbled. And I said to the other student, I said, oh, tell us about the black coloring at the top. And he said, This is the dust from the explosion that happened when this bad guy came to this bad guy. And he had this whole elaborate story, and all the kids were like, oh, I get it. And they were sharing their visuals of his story and connections that they had to it right away. And I think without having the writer there, you need that, or it does look like scribbles sometimes. Like Beth said, you have to have that educator's mind when you look at this writing. So that helps. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Deb. So, hi everyone. I'm here today to talk a little bit about feedback and how it pertains to young writers. So for the next several minutes, I'm just going to share with you what I've learned from the research about feedback, and then also how I've worked to incorporate that research then into my own teaching practice. So I've come to rely on like 4 main structures that I return to time and time again for giving kids feedback, and I'm just going to share those with you today. So like many of you, when I was young and learning how to write, I rarely received any valuable feedback about my writing. I received a lot of corrections from my teachers, but I very rarely received any valuable feedback. So I really didn't come to understand what feedback does for a writer until well into my adulthood. Actually, it wasn't until I started blogging and sharing my writing with other adults that I finally understood what feedback could mean. As a writer, feedback is everything to me. So my aim is for students to understand what feedback is and to appreciate it while they're still young and building their identities as writers. So what does the research say about feedback? Let me pull out my slide for you. So we know from John Hattie's very extensive meta-analysis that feedback matters. Hattie looked at the effect size of hundreds of teaching practices, right? And he found feedback has an effect size of 0.75, which is in what he calls the zone of desired effects. So this means that feedback has a large and positive effect on student achievement. As a matter of fact, Hattie actually placed feedback within the top 10 influences on student achievement. Now, if you've read Hattie's work, you know that Hattie went on to describe feedback, and he says it should be 4 things: that it should be timely, specific, understandable, and actionable. If you want more information on that, I highly suggest this book, which was written with Fisher and Frey. It's called Visible Learning for Literacy, and it's great, and it goes really in depth into feedback. For today's purposes, though, let's just all agree that we know feedback matters to kids. So what that means to me as a teacher is that I want my students getting feedback on their writing as often as possible. I want students to have plenty of chances to offer feedback to one another. So the first thing I have to do is teach students how to give meaningful feedback. Now, I know a lot of teachers have developed really ingenious systems for teaching kids about feedback. I've heard teachers use a wow and a wonder, or other teachers say give a glow and a grow. I am not that creative, and so I simply modeled my system for feedback after what I learned from blogging. So I participate in the weekly Slice of Life blogging challenge over at Two Writing Teachers. I am no stranger to receiving comments and feedback on my writing from that challenge. If you're not familiar with it, the weekly Slice of Life challenge is an opportunity for adults to blog about small moments in their lives. It's like a weekly practice in narrative writing. So every week you share your link at Two Writing Teachers to your Slice of Life story, and other slicers, that's what we call each other, they'll read your story and leave feedback for you on your writing. So I took the time to comb through all of the comments I have received on my writing, and I found 3 major types of responses. So first, I noticed that people often tell me how my writing made them feel. Those comments sound like, "Oh, Dana, that brought tears to my eyes," or, "Oh, that line about Katie actually made me laugh out loud." Secondly, people leave comments telling me what they noticed about my writing. They might say something like, "When you used the word chucked instead of threw, I thought that was the perfect word." Lastly, sometimes people just make a connection to the topic that I wrote about. They might write something like, "My mom is the same way, Dana." So when I teach kids to comment on one another's writing, I usually just start here with these 3 ways. In an effort to make our feedback more specific, we often then refer to what we are learning about that genre that we're currently working in. So we might look at checklists or rubrics or lists of criteria that pertain to the current unit. For example, we're currently in a slice of life story unit with 6th grade, so together we constructed this list of criteria for slice of life stories. So when we're giving feedback on one another's writing, we know that we can refer back to this list, which helps us ground our feedback in these main categories. So of course, the more that we practice giving and receiving feedback, the more specific and timely our feedback becomes. At first, your kids' feedback might not be that great, but they need practice. And the more they practice, the better they'll become. I'm going to share this next slide with you. So this is another activity that I have found to be really useful. Sometimes we have the writer, after they collect feedback from the group, the writer can sort the feedback into 2 piles, helpful feedback and not helpful feedback. This then kind of allows the class to examine the feedback and begin to study it. And together the class can decide then what makes some feedback helpful and some not so much. It's sort of like the launch of this inquiry unit into giving feedback. Okay, so the first step is teaching kids how to give feedback. And then after they become pretty adept at it, there's 2 structures that I return to time and time again in classrooms of all ages. And these 2 structures allow the students opportunities to practice giving feedback to one another. So the first is what we call a gallery walk. Just like you might meander around an art gallery, looking at the art on display, lingering at some pieces, glancing quickly at others. A writing gallery is when every writer lays out a piece of writing for viewing. You can play music softly in the background, and students can choose which pieces of writing to read and respond to. Students wander around the room and they just leave feedback on Post-its for one another. I have done this countless times in so many classrooms. We have done it with finished pieces, with pieces that are in progress, with notebooks, and the kids just love it. They cannot wait to return to their desks to see what kind of feedback was left for them. These gallery walks work really great with writing notebooks because the notebooks all typically look so different. And so students are not only practicing giving feedback, but they're getting ideas for their own writing. It really goes a long way into building a community of writers in your classroom. The second structure that I like to use is what I call feedback friends. So unlike a gallery walk, this structure isn't for the whole class, but it's used more for on-the-spot feedback as needed. I do a lot of my writing late at night after we have put our daughters to bed, and I'm typically writing on the couch with my laptop, and my husband's in the same room watching TV, and I frequently find myself stopping to ask him, what's another word I could use here, or how do you think this ending sounds? So sometimes I just need like on the spot feedback from someone. Feedback Friends then is just a way for your students to get that feedback right there when they need it. And all you need to do is develop a system in your classroom for students who need a feedback friend. Perhaps they might go and jot their name on the smartboard, or maybe they just simply move to a designated spot in the room. Once they are there with a friend, all you have to do is give them the time and the space to share their writing. In my mind, feedback friends are a little bit different from a writing partnership. I think of writing partners as like long-term, in-depth talk about writing, where feedback friends are more just quick, just when I need it feedback. So thinking about feedback, what else does the research tell us about feedback? Well, in his book, Dylan Willem, his book is Embedding Formative Assessment. He said that the only thing that really matters about feedback is the kind of reaction it triggers in the recipient. As a matter of fact, I just want to read to you from page 107 of his book what he wrote. He said, "The only thing that matters with feedback is the reaction of the recipient. That's it. Feedback, no matter how well designed, that the student does not act upon is a waste of time. This may seem obvious, but hundreds of researchers have ignored this basic truth and tried instead to find out whether feedback should be immediate or delayed. Should it be specific or general? Should it be verbal or written? In the remainder of this chapter, we look at how to make feedback more effective, but ultimately it comes down to this simple truth. The most effective feedback is just feedback that our students actually use in improving their own learning." So if our student, we could give the best feedback in the world, but if our students aren't doing anything with it, then it doesn't really matter, does it? So thinking of that and how I can apply that to my own teaching practice, there's two structures that I like to use to make feedback more meaningful for the writer. The first comes from my experience at the Choice Literacy Writing Retreat that I go on every summer. On this writing retreat, we have long periods of writing, and then we come together in small groups for responses. We'll just go find somewhere comfortable to sit, and one of us will volunteer to be the first to share our writing with the group. That person passes out a copy of the writing to everyone in the group, and then they tell us what kind of feedback that they would like. So they might say something like, "I'm not sure my ending works here," or "I'm wondering if you guys think that this feedback or that this piece is practical enough." So that's not to say we don't offer the writer other feedback after we read it. We do, but we always start with the feedback that the writer needed. This is a practice that you can take right into your classroom. Just whenever possible, see what the writer needs first. The second structure I like to use is called Critical Friends Procedure. So I originally saw this done on the teaching channel. The video is still there. I just checked last night, and you can access it at the link right here in my presentation. I have used this procedure with so many students and with adults. The anchor chart here on the side kind of outlines the steps. So first, everybody reads a piece of writing that was written by someone in the group. The writer then sits as a silent witness during steps 2 and 3 while the group discusses warm and cool feedback. Warm feedback is generally praise. Cool feedback might be more suggestive in nature. The writer is completely silent but taking notes during this time. After the discussion, the writer can then re-enter the conversation and respond. So he or she might disagree with something that was said, or ask for further clarification, or simply explain something to the group. And then finally, in step 5, the group disbands, and the writer is then free to revise his or her writing based on the feedback. The beauty of this structure and why I like it so much is that the writer decides which feedback to act on and which feedback really didn't resonate with him or her. The writer's the one in control of the writing. When I've done this with kids, I've had them bring the writing back the next day and show us the revisions that they made. So I would love to hear about the ways you guys are making feedback work for the writers in your room. You can feel free to email me or tweet me at DanaMurphy68 anytime. I think that's it for us today. We hope that you found some things that will affirm your current teaching practices and also some things that will inspire you to think in new ways about going public with your kids' writing. Beth and Deb, I was trying to read our chat messages while I was talking, but it was hard. Was there a Twitter question about screencasting tools?
Yes, there was. I did get a screencasting question, excuse me, from Lit Coach Lady, and I shared those out under the hashtag. So they're there on Twitter now.
Okay, awesome.
We do have one more question, guys, from Paula, and she's asking, recopying and retyping takes up valuable time for writing. Is it really necessary?
Beth, do you want to talk about that?
Yeah, I'll respond to that. I think Paula might be maybe reiterating something that I said earlier about, recopying or retyping does take up a lot of time. So we want to be just very clear about why we're doing that. What's accomplished by recopying that is not accomplished by displaying the student work with all the great revisions and hard work that they've done for everyone to see and appreciate. So I learned a long time ago, a good guideline is when students want to recopy, that's kind of rule number one, when they want to, and they could do it in like one writer's workshop or less, then there's really no reason not to. It's something that they want to do, they're motivated to do it, it's meaningful to them, fine. But any more time than that, and especially if kids don't want to, then it just means developmentally, or maybe with their writing fluency, or just where they're at as a writer, if they don't see a good reason to do it, then it's just not the right time to be introducing that to kids. So that's my 2 cents anyway.
I love it, Beth. That's a great rule of thumb.
Yeah, great points.
All right, thank you, ladies, and thank you for those of you who joined us. Thank you, Dana, Beth, and Deb, for that wonderful presentation on helping us to rethink writing. We're keeping those 3 critical categories in mind: audience, purpose, and feedback. So lots of great ideas to take away from. Thank you so much, ladies, for sharing. For those of you who are still with us, please stay with us, because coming up in the next few minutes, we have lots of wonderful workshops still to come. We have Chris presenting workshop number 15. He's going to be talking about taking control of your professional learning and choosing your own PD. We have workshop number 16 by Roz Linder. And Kelly, and they're going to be talking about getting students excited about writing arguments. Workshop number 17 by Tammy and Claire, talking about engaging students in the assessment process. And then workshop number 18 by Julian and Dominique, talking about read alouds and culturally relevant read alouds. Also, we have Christina Torres and her students going to be presenting on podcasting, workshop number 19. So lots of great things coming up. I hope you'll stay with us and join us in the next coming workshops. And once again, thank you to our 2 writing teachers, ladies, for coming on again and joining us and sharing with us their passion for writing and lots of great tools to take with us into our classrooms. Thank you, ladies. Thank you, everyone. Goodbye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.